Hey guys, Bix Weir, roadtoroot.com. I'm here with my good friend, Andy Schectman from Miles Franklin. Andy has been so gracious to give Road to Ruta subscribers all his heart and soul over the past couple months, getting people situated to survive the chaos that we all see coming down the pike. Andy, how are you?
Bix, good to see you, brother. I'm hanging in there. It's been an interesting 3-4 months, but overall, we're hanging in there. We're doing good. I got a little bit of rest lately, so I'm hanging in there.
Well, that's excellent. And I know you guys are shipping a lot of physical silver out of Miles Franklin. I know I've been buying from you as well as a lot of the Road to Ruta members. And the amazing thing to me is that when you're in the middle of a massive decades long price suppression in a certain asset, and you get like little bumps up or little bumps down, a quarter here, a nickel there. 3-5 years from now, we're going to look back and just kick ourselves, say, oh my God, why didn't I, sell the house and sell the boat and sell the cars to load up on this asset that I knew in my gut was massively manipulated, massively undervalued. I think that's where we are now. And I think the world is starting to figure out that our financial system is not exactly what they tell us it is. From the stock market to the amount of money being created by the Fed to the amount of bailouts that are going on, that all of a sudden bailouts don't need approval by Congress, whereas in 2008 they did. What's your take on it, first on the overall world as we know it?
Well, it's been, I don't even know how to explain what it's been. It's been exhausting. It's been frightening. It's been interesting. I think we're in for a. I watched one of your podcasts the other day, and you were saying 50 times what it was the first half, what you're expecting the second half, and so am I. And I look at a corner that the Fed has painted themselves into. I mean, let's just talk about future for a moment. Ask yourself this: with the federal funds rate, Bix, going negative on the futures market into January of next year, well, let's just call it zero. So who in their right mind would buy a 10-year treasury earning a zero coupon from a government that's created north of $7 trillion since last September 11th? You've covered that subject of the repo market pretty well. $1.5 trillion since May, $3 trillion since February. Mind you, 1 trillion seconds was 31,688 years ago. But who in their right mind would buy a 10-year treasury with a zero coupon from an insolvent government creating massive amounts of inflation? The Fed has backed themselves into a corner. They have two choices. Either they continue to monetize the debt, which leads us to higher interest rates in Weimar Republic, United States, or they back away, which leads to massively high interest rates and the Great Depression, the greatest depression. I am looking for, regardless of how the election plays out, I am looking for hyperstagflation on the horizon, which is characterized, it's the worst of all outcomes, much higher prices and little or no economic development. The economy has been sucker punched 2 or 3 times, and I don't know if it gets back up anytime soon. And what the Fed is doing, creating copious amounts of money, sprinkling it across the globe, is very, very dangerous and leads us to a very, very bad place. I don't have to tell you anything along those lines, but I'll tell you what's very interesting this time. What's really different, if there ever is a difference this time, it is the fact that we are seeing massive mainstream participation. That massive mainstream participation is something I've never seen in 30 years. Normally, I would get 5-10% of people's portfolios at best, begrudgingly, because they felt it was the right thing to do. And now it's the antithesis of that. We're getting phone calls every day from people who know nothing of gold and silver, who have huge stock portfolios, 6 and 7 figures, who normally would be seeking refuge in the bond market. But with the bond market earning zero or close to it, that inverse correlation between stocks and bonds, they used to call it risk on, risk off, it's gone. Now they're positively correlated. So as interest rates rise, eventually they will, they both get creamed. And so you're finding people seeking safety and refuge in gold and silver. And what that's creating is something I fear we're going to see in the mainstream here on Main Street very soon, and that is price inflation. We've seen wicked price inflation in this market, and albeit it's come back a bit lately, and that comes with spring, hope springs eternal, and summer, and vitamin D, and reopening of the economy, and people are optimistic. I understand that. That's cool. With that, the prices come down, and there's decent availability. But don't forget, Bix, that almost 60% of every mine on the planet and was shut the first 4 months of the year. That's going to create a massive backlog come fall. Don't forget that almost all the major refineries in the world are located on the Swiss-Italian border. They were all shut. Going to create a massive backlog. Don't forget that all of the coins that people have in their hands right now that are dated 2020, most of them were made in November and December of 2019. That's the way the mints work. They stop production roughly late third quarter and start producing the subsequent year's items. So you got 2 months worth of production. I sold all of that. There were massive delivery delays when they shut down right at the beginning of the year. Never sent us that product until much later. But now, all of that stuff, the new product is going to run into, I think, by fall, with the confluence of events, all the PPP and the CARES program and the $1,200 to every man, woman, and child. All that stuff is dissipating. You have an election. You have all of the coronavirus-related things that play into the government's reaction. All of this stuff coming together this fall. And I'll tell you something. The people that I talk to every day, your people and the mainstream people who are now jumping in with both feet plugging their nose, going underwater with gold and silver, there's a tremendous amount of concern about what's coming the second half of the year. And when I heard you say that the other day, I picked up the phone and called you or texted you and said, let's do this, because I couldn't agree more. In fact, so much so that I have instructed my operations to go into our line of credit and buy everything that can't be nailed down into the end of the summer. Because quite frankly, I think that it's going to be a frightening, interesting time this fall as we head towards the election. So for your listeners, I'm going to have product. I'm going to get them the best price in the country. And I'm going to continue to work tirelessly until I can't get any more product. And quite frankly, in March, I thought that was a possibility. In March, when the supply chains were broken and the prices were going to the moon and people were terrified, getting product was very difficult. I'm not making that mistake this time, and I am literally buying everything that can't be nailed down heading into the fall. So I echo your sentiment. I'm concerned. I think this is like right in the eye of the hurricane. We already had the craziness that was the first half of the year, and now, I mean, I watched a police station 15 minutes away from my house burn to the ground, for God's sakes, in a state that they call Minnesota nice. That's the nickname here, Minnesota nice. I watched things happen in this town that I never thought would happen before, which it just helps solidify my feeling that when the back end, trailing edge of this storm comes through, late summer, early fall, we ought to all be buckled up. And I'm making sure, at least in terms of supply, I'm going to be able to take care of your people. And can't thank you enough for your trust, Bix. It means the world to me. And I take it very, very seriously. And I hope your listeners have mentioned that to you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot to unpack with what you just said. Definitely my listeners are extremely appreciative. I hear it all the time that they have a great experience with you. A lot of people freak out after they buy silver and say, oh my God, where's my shipment? It's got to come in today. 99% of what I tell people is you got to trust who you're dealing with. I trust you guys 100%. Anybody who's ever had an issue, you've jumped on it. Even if it was a normal, hey, your shipment was supposed to arrive at 2:00 on Tuesday and it arrived at 2:15 and they start freaking out, you're very good at jumping on the phone and holding their hand personally. So absolutely, if you guys want to buy silver, Andy at Miles Franklin. Another thing I want to unpack from what you just said, when you're talking about interest rates and you're talking about what bonds are paying, remember, if you're a gold bug, you go back to the fundamentals. One of the biggest things that non-gold bugs say is that why would I want to own gold when it doesn't pay me any interest? And now you're owning massive amounts of US denominated debt, massive amounts of bonds, all that stuff is paying nothing. So why do you want to, that argument of people saying Why would I own gold when it doesn't pay interest? First of all, it's a hedge on the system that's falling apart right now. Second of all, the monetary factor of them printing unlimited amounts of money out the back door of the Fed should be a no-brainer for everybody who understands the volume of money printed versus the scarcity in gold and silver. Those are like the two no-brainers. But the biggest thing that has changed, and I believe why people are starting to rush into gold, you've got central banks with negative interest rates all around the world. The U.S. is practically at zero. We might go negative. I don't know. They have other ways to deal with that, behind the scenes, rigging markets and things like that. But the reality is that argument for not owning gold and not owning silver is completely out the window now. So if you ever heard yourself saying, why would I want to own gold and silver when it doesn't pay a dividend or you don't make any interest on it? There are people who are making interest on silver, and that's what I'd like to talk to you about now. Is Ted Butler's figured out that JP Morgan, who loaded up on over 1 billion ounces of physical silver while they were shorting the market to keep prices low, has now resorted to leasing out their silver. And what Ted believes is that these big bullion banks need the silver to go into SLV, which is the big silver ETF. Oh, by the way, JP Morgan is the custodian of SLV. So JP Morgan covers itself. You might think leasing silver is a third-party problem that you really don't want to deal with because your third party might go bankrupt. Well, JP Morgan figured out a way around that by owning the silver, leasing it out so these criminal banks can throw it into the market, and they still hold it because they're the custodian of SLV. When it comes to the undervaluation of silver, the mass manipulation of silver, the volumes on the COMEX are over 120 billion ounces per year traded hands on the futures and options. Do you see any way that we can get out of this silver manipulation game without the entire thing blowing up and shutting down the COMEX and things like that?
Probably not. I hope so, but the COMEX is a farce, and we've all known that for a long time. The COMEX blowing up is another question. I mean, it's something that I've always, in the back of my mind, really never thought would happen until recently. When you see the amount of contracts standing for delivery, I think what would happen first would be a force majeure and a cash settlement, which would expose the COMEX for what it is, and that is a fraud, a fractionalized fraud. Look, the bottom line is simply this. When the most sophisticated, well-funded, well-informed investors on the planet amass 1 billion ounces of silver, 10 times what the Hunt brothers tried to acquire, the handwriting is on the wall. When the Bank of International Settlements reclassifies gold as the only tier 1 asset on the planet, last April, it signifies where they think the long game is for gold. And with a 90% correlation from the beginning of time between gold and silver, and the most sophisticated, nefarious, well-funded, influential commercial bank on the planet has amassed the largest physical position the world has ever seen while holding down the paper prices, and now, of course, facing a Justice Department inquiry and 6 federal indictments, racketeering charges on their trading desk, things are starting to come full circle, and light is being shown upon it. I think that the bottom line is that the only way to win this game is to do what the big banks are doing, and not so much the narrative that is popular or conventional. It's do what they're doing, and the bottom line is they're de-dollarizing and amassing massive quantities of gold and silver. And something you said earlier too about interest. There is a term in economics called Gibson's paradox, which speaks of the inverse relationship between precious metals, gold typically, and real interest rates. With interest rates at or near zero across the globe going negative, there is very little, if any, opportunity cost for owning precious metals. But when you throw on top of it massive, massive money printing, it only adds fuel to the fire. And when you see what the central banks are doing and what the commercial banks are doing, I don't know if COMEX blowing up or not will be the catalyst or be a byproduct of gold and silver going much, much higher. But the bottom line is I see no way that gold and silver can't go much higher. And quite frankly, for the first time in my career, I'm not only 100% convinced that it will, but I'm also very concerned about this country and the road that we are on over the next couple of years. I think it's going to be hyper-stagflation, Bix. I think it's going to be much higher prices and an economy that struggles to get up off the mat. And I really hope that I'm wrong. But quite frankly, I don't see many places on the planet Earth to put your money with safety. A stock market that is overvalued as anything in history, that has been funded by reckless abandon by the Federal Reserve, and a bond market that is being kept alive by the Federal Reserve. At some point, whether it be through massive inflation or the Fed stepping away, interest rates will rise. And then the bond market falls over. And if that happens in conjunction with the stock market running out of gas and falling over, if they both fall over this fall, as I am kind of expecting that they will, where do you put your money on the planet Earth other than precious metals and maybe some cryptocurrencies that give you any semblance of security, safety, upside potential? I don't see anywhere but gold and silver. And so ultimately the COMEX may fail, but I don't know if that's the catalyst or the byproduct of the outcome of where gold and silver go on their own based upon massive accumulation across the globe. You know, there's an old saying, the only way you can successfully manipulate a market is to push it in the direction it's going. And it was real easy to do that in the 90s and the last part of last decade when no one wanted precious metals, they just wanted equities. That's a different game right now. And I can tell you that we have, since February, brought on over 1,500 new clients, most of which have never bought gold ever before. So I will say to you that it is an expanding narrative. People are waking up. I'm hearing from financial advisors every single day. And the only way, as Ted Butler always used to say, and I believe, is the only way to beat these guys is to buy physical, take it off and hold it. And when massive amounts of people start doing that, instead of the small little choir that you and I have been talking to for the past 15 years, all of a sudden that choir is now 12 rows deep into the audience, almost up into the balcony. And I think it's being accepted and embraced by the mainstream. That demand, that massive influx in demand, ought to be enough to tip the scales. And when that happens, yes, I wouldn't want to be holding a whole bunch of COMEX contracts expecting delivery at that point, because you know, the rehypothecation of the COMEX market is many hundreds of times over. And there's no question, but if it comes to that, there's going to be 99.9% of the people who hold those contracts are left holding the bag and will be cash settled in a force majeure situation.
Well said. I agree with you 100% on everything you said. I think when it comes to silver, let's talk briefly about the difference. I mean, the COMEX gold silver ratio is at 100-1, but that's not the physical ratio. I mean, it's so blatant that because silver has huge premiums compared to gold percentage wise, you can't trade, 100-1, trade your gold for silver, but you can still get a lot of silver historically for 1 ounce of gold.
Yes.
And I know Miles Franklin does do that type of deal where
Yes.
people can trade in their gold for silver. The problem is people think, well, why don't I get 100-1? Well, the 100-1 that we see right now is what they show on the COMEX. That's a fake price,
Right.
Fake price for gold and a fake price for silver, and a fake relationship on how much is available of each.
Yeah.
But clearly the gold vaults around the world, if you look at like all the visible gold, everybody's throwing gold into the COMEX for some unknown reason, into the COMEX warehouses. And the warehouses are just exploding with gold. And I've for a long time said, hey, there's a hell of a lot more gold out there than they tell you, and a hell of a lot less silver.
Well,
so tell us what's going on the physical side.
Well, on that one question about the COMEX, part of me feels that's a byproduct of the Justice Department investigation, saying to these commercial banks, look, you idiots, you got all these short contracts and you don't have the bars in the warehouse to justify that. We're going to give you a period of time before we throw the book at you all. Let's hope this is the way they speak. Show us the real gold and silver. Put it in the vaults. take it off the ledger, and show us it exists. And that's kind of what I think they're doing right now, scrambling, like the rats scrambling to leave the ship, sinking ship. I think that's happening. In terms of the ratio, whether it works out to spot for spot or the byproduct of the premiums with it, even with the premiums, you're getting 85, 90 to 1. That's rarefied error. Anytime you are above 80 to 1, you should be in silver. Anytime you're below 80 to 1, you should think, or excuse me, anytime you're below 45 to 1, you should be in gold. And quite frankly, at this level, it's a screaming buy to buy silver. It doesn't matter if the ratio after you factor in the premiums drops you down a bit. Even at 85 or 90 to 1 real, that's the top 0.5% of any swap I've ever done in 30 years. And quite frankly, I think swaps are huge. It's the best way to build your stack without spending a penny. It's as simple as sending back your gold to us. We give you highest bid price in America, charge you no commission ever on the buyback. Take the proceeds, apply it to silver, and send it back to you. You walk away, in my opinion, with the best possible swap trade that I've seen in 30 years. That doesn't matter that the premium on silver is high, because you're still getting premium on gold. And I guess it's like Richard Russell always said, it doesn't matter, the dollar price doesn't matter, it's your wealth will be calculated in the number of ounces. I'm not trying to be cavalier here. I'm not trying to poo-poo the fact that, yes, we'd like to get more value. The bottom line is simply this: premium is a reflection of supply and demand. In March, we had higher premiums than I've ever seen in 30 years. And you talked about people freaking out. People would send, I would send them an invoice, they'd send or check. It probably hadn't even left the mailbox yet, and they're asking where it is. And I understand that, because that was a time filled with anxiety and concern and fear. And none of us knew what was going on then. I think we're going to see that again. I think we're going to see that this fall in spades. And so if you're going to do something like this, you don't want to be shipping your gold through the mail when there's craziness and rioting and uncertainty. We are in a sweet spot right now, not only in terms of product, but in terms of premiums. They've come back down considerably. They're still much higher than they were in November of last year and all of the last 5 years. But you know what? When you're 10 minutes late to the dance, you dance with whatever girl is there. And you may not have your chance to dance with the one you want to. She's already dancing with someone else. And, you know, I'm going to make sure your listeners get the best price in the country, period. So they're not going to get it better anywhere else. I'm going to charge them no commission. I'm going to help them get the gold back. And I'm going to give them the best price on silver in the country. I'm going to get it to them before the shit hits the fan. That's the most important thing.
And it's true. I mean, one of our first big transactions was me swapping gold for silver, and it's seamless. It's seamless. There's not, you feel like, oh, there's no money coming out of my pocket, and oh, by the way, I'm getting many more ounces of a metal that is literally of equal amounts above ground and available on planet Earth right now. About 6.5 billion each for gold and silver. And I mean, if you take price, the current price of silver versus the current price of gold, out of all the equation, you look at how much is being mined, you look at how much is in the ground, you look at the availability of investable silver. Every single ratio you look at is screaming silver should be way down there, below 30 to 1, below 20 to 1. If you're looking at above ground silver, it's 1 to 1. So why is the price of silver 100 times less than the price of gold? It's manipulation. It's COMEX, it's LBMA, it's the big banks. And they're the ones, I think, who are going to be hurting come November, come December. They're hurting now. This is the first time in the last, Ted Butler was saying 35 years that the shorts have actually been taking losses. They've been, for 35 years, they were winning the short game by fleecing all the investors. Over the past couple of months, they've been starting to take hits. You saw HSBC take a huge hit in the metals trading. You saw CIBC take a huge hit. Who was the other one? Scotiabank obviously is getting out. They were in the metals business for, I think it was 400 plus years. And now they're taking losses and getting out. That's a long run to win. But why are they losing now? I think it's because people are finally waking up to the reality that the price that they are telling people at the LBMA or the COMEX is fake, is phony, is a rigged price, and everybody should be getting their hands on as much physical for this crazy time that you and I both know are coming up. It's crazy now, but I agree. It's going to be 50 times worse the rest of this year, and the rest of this year starts on Wednesday. Wednesday is July 1st, so hang on to your hats. Andy, is there any last words you want to give to the gang out there?
Yeah, look, a couple of things just before I let you run. You know who Keith Newmeyer is, don't you? He's the CEO of First Majestic. He's told me personally that what he sees coming out of the ground is 8-to-1 right now. Don't forget that silver is found in nature in something called epithermal. It's found very close to the surface. So the big deposits were found decades ago. It's rare nowadays to find a dedicated silver mine because 70% of all the silver comes as a byproduct of mining other metals. The big deposits, the days of huge deposits, are long since behind us. And when you talk about commercial banks taking losses, I think it's important for all your listeners to remember that in 12 years, JP Morgan and thousands of trades never took 1 penny of a loss. 1 penny. That would be as if, well, let's pretend that Major League Baseball actually was going on right now. Your favorite baseball player who gets 500 at-bats in a season never gets out, ever. Strikeout, fly out, ground out, fielder's choice, sac fly, nothing but 500 straight hits. It's a mathematic impossibility. They figured out a way to do it. All you need to do is take a step back and remember three things. One, that they never took a loss and they've been allowed to manipulate it. And for those of your listeners who will Google the Chris Marcus, Bart Chilton interview, where Bart Chilton admits all of this and then dies a week later. Kind of weird about that, coincidental, but listen to that. You have JP Morgan never taking a loss, admitting that they were guilty, Bart Chilton, and that he wanted prosecution, but it was a political decision to not. To realize that gold was reclassified as a tier 1 asset and that JP Morgan has amassed 1 billion ounces. Those three things alone should tell you that the most sophisticated, well-funded, well-informed, influential traders on the globe have decided that gold and silver are part of what comes next. The price is nothing but distraction for one reason, and that is the tool of misdirection. It's the no-look pass in basketball. All you need to do is screw with the price and everyone looks the other way, except guys like you and I who open up the hood and look underneath. No one ever opens up the hood and looks underneath. You do a good job of that as anyone I've ever seen in this industry, digging deep, reading stuff that's impossible to read and understand. You find a way to do it and explain it to the people, and for that, everyone listening to you should be thankful. I find that your greatest quality, to be able to explain these difficult concepts, most of them that you read on the Fed's website, and explain it so we can all understand. But that's what's happening. The big money is making a once-in-a-generation shift from paper crap to tangibles. And there's no way in the world that the world will drink the Kool-Aid ever again if it is not tethered to something like gold or silver or them both. And when you see the most sophisticated players on the globe doing this quietly, tiptoeing, it should be illuminating. So I'm honored to help your listeners. Once again, all they need to do is email me at Andy@MilesFranklin, put Road to Ruta in the subject line. Let me know what they're looking for. I'll guarantee them the best price in the country. If I have it, it'll be the best price. If I have to get it, I'll let them know that. And I'll make it personally a good experience. I will respond personally to 80% of the people that email me. It gets a little hard sometimes to do it in a timely fashion, in which case I then forward it on to 1 or 2 of my most trusted brokers. Everyone at Miles Franklin has been here decades. We're the only state in America, Bix, that's licensed and bonded. In the state of Minnesota, it's a federally non-regulated industry. We are licensed and bonded. We've been doing this for 30 years. We've never had a customer complaint. We're one of only 24 companies ever approved by the U.S. Mint. We are overly qualified to handle your people in these crazy times, and it's my honor to do it. And I thank you for the privilege, and I'll make sure it's a good experience for you, for your listeners. And I'm telling you something, buckle up, man, because I think coming into the fall, it's going to be nuts. And because of that, I have loaded the coffers with as much as I can get, and I'm continuing to do it until the election. or until I can't get any more. And your listeners are at the top of the list. So thank you, Bix. I do appreciate you very much, man.
Well, thank you. I mean, we're all in debt to this program that we've set up for the Road to Ruta members and listeners. And I know we've been doing a lot of volume in silver. And I just want to end this video with a saying that I heard literally when I was in my teens. And I was looking at Nostradamus's predictions of the future. And some of them have come true. The Twin Towers coming down was a Nostradamus prediction. But one of his predictions that always stuck in my head was imitations of gold and silver will be tossed into the lake. And that's what I see today on the COMEX, the LBMA, and SLV. These are imitations of gold and silver. I advise everybody, get the real thing, physical silver in your own possession so that it doesn't get tossed into the lake.
I never heard that.
Want to get it? Send an email to Andy@milesfranklin.com. Andy, thank you so much for spending time with us, and we'll catch up real soon.
Bix, you take care, brother. And I'm always here when you want to drop in and see what's going on in this industry. In the meantime, please take care of yourself, and thanks again.
Thank you.